Hey guys, I just did a live for this particular channel, so I figured I'd just hop on right here and give you guys an official prediction for the UFC 290 main card. I don't know if I'm going to go through the entire card, but I'll give you some predictions for the entire main card because I did go over the entire card on the live. Now, unfortunately, the live had a little bit of an echo, so I figured I was just going to do a regular video for this one just to kind of give you guys a full detailed breakdown of how I think each of these fights are going to happen. So we're going to start out with the main event with none other than Alexander Volkanovski taking on Yair Rodriguez. Now, in this particular fight, you have Yair Rodriguez, who is the 145 interim champion, not even the undisputed champion, but has a custom made belt for this specific event, or maybe just for the fact that he is the current champion as the interim champion at that. And then you have Alexander Volkanovski, who's been the longtime champion of this particular weight class and is coming off of a tough decision loss against Khabib. I'm sorry, not Khabib, the student of Khabib, none other than Islam Makhachev. The way that I see this fight, I can see Yair Rodriguez giving Alexander Volkanovski some sort of problems on the feet. Why? Because he's very elusive, karate based, taekwondo based, has an acrobatic style of the way that he throws his kicks, very unorthodox. So he's going to be hard to time, especially when he throws shots at Alexander Volkanovski. I'm talking about Yair Rodriguez. Eventually, I think that the wrestling of Alexander Volkanovski is going to break down Yair Rodriguez. Could I see a finish going on to this fight? Yes. I can potentially see a finish somewhere in the later rounds, and if not so, Alexander Volkanovski is going to get a decision win on this one. A 5-round decision. It's not going to be one of those 5-round decisions where you saw with Islam Makhachev, to where it was a very close fight, at least in the eyes of many people. In my opinion, not much of a close fight because the wrestling was just in the favor of Islam Makhachev. But in this particular case, I think Alexander Volkanovski has the way better wrestling than Yair Rodriguez, and I could see Alexander Volkanovski using that to get the win. Now, moving on, in the beginning of the opener of the pay-per-view, you have Bo Nickel taking on Val Woodburn. Now, originally, you were supposed to have Tresean Gore take on Bo Nickel, but for whatever reason, Tresean Gore has some sort of undisclosed injury, or maybe just not an injury that I've to research yet or as to why. But nonetheless, they bring out Val Woodburn from the regional scenes to take on Bo Nickel. Now, what's significant about this fight is that you don't really know much about Val Woodburn. I remember back in the days, Forrest Griffin said something to the effect where, you know, it's very hard to fight these up-and-coming guys because they may not have a name, but they just haven't really gotten a chance yet. And perhaps maybe Val Woodburn would be one of these guys. However, I highly doubt it. Bo Nickel has had over 400 wrestling matches his entire career. The way that I see this fight is that he's not going to be fazed by the opponent change by any means of the imagination. Val Woodburn is a little bit more of an MMA veteran compared to Bo Nickel, with 3 fights over him, 7-0 versus 4-0, 2 undefeated guys going at this fight. But Bo Nickel's experience in combat sports altogether just is really going to translate in this fight, especially with a late replacement. I could see Bo Nickel getting a first-round submission on this one. Jalen Turner taking on Dan Hooker. Now, I said in the live that this particular fight, in comparison to all the entire fight card, I think is the biggest 50-50 fight in the entire card. Not just the main card, maybe even the prelims and the early prelims itself. Now, the way that I see this fight, I can see Jalen Turner really knocking out Dan Hooker. Now, Dan Hooker is a veteran. The only way that Dan Hooker can win this fight is by a decision. He has to fight very methodically, very carefully. But the way Jalen Turner moves and the way that he knocks people out, the way that he can use his reach at 155, and Dan Hooker is not that far away. He's a tall 155er himself, but Jalen Turner is just a step ahead of being 2 inches taller in reach and in height, in which Dan Hooker has to be first every exchange that they go at it. But Jalen Turner knows how to use his height, but has knockout power. I could see Jalen Turner getting a knockout win on this one, if not Dan Hooker with a possible decision win if he fights carefully and methodically. Now, with Robert Whittaker and Dricus du Plessis, the way that I see this fight, I see this going to a close decision for Robert Whittaker. Why? I think that Dricus du Plessis is very difficult to finish. I think that he is up there in terms of world level, but there's a difference between being world level, being top 15, being top 10, in comparison to being one of the top 2 or top 5 of the entire division. Robert Whittaker is the top 2 of the entire 185 division. The only guy that has taken Adesanya to the limit other than Kelvin Gastelum. And on top of that, he beats everybody else in the 185 division not named Israel Adesanya. As great as it would seem to see Dricus du Plessis go in there and win, and not only win, but also get that fight with Israel Adesanya, it just doesn't work out like that. It's not a Rocky movie. It's not anything like that. It's not the fictional world that you're used to. Robert Whittaker is going to edge out a decision on this one, and he's going to show his skills and well-roundedness all throughout this fight. Brandon Moreno taking on Alexander Pantoja. I'm going to have to go with Alexander Pantoja on this one. He knows how to beat Brandon Moreno. He has beaten him before, and now that Brandon Moreno is the champion, I think that it's one of those situations where maybe Brandon Moreno has taken way too much damage and way too many shots all throughout the entire career of his fighting life, right? There has to be a limit to these things. You look at the wars that he's had with Figueroa, and now he's going into this fight with Pantoja. Pantoja seems to be fresh. He seems to be getting better, and eventually he just kept climbing to the ranks. Now here he is as one of the top 125ers in the world that could possibly upset Brandon Moreno. I see Alex Pantoja winning this one by a decision. I think that he's going to outstrike him. Maybe he can even out-wrestle him or out-grapple him. There's going to be a lot of good scrambles that's going to happen in this fight, but I think a lot of those scrambles are going to go in the favor of Alexander Pantoja. And once again, I already went through with the Alexander Volkanovski-Yair Rodriguez fight. Again, I really do see that fight going to a decision. And why? Because of the fact that I think Yair Rodriguez has proven he is at the top of the division, but there's being at the top of the division, and then there's just being better than everybody else. And right now, if you're not Islam Makhachev, or if you're not one of the 155ers that could give Alexander Volkanovski problems, and you're just a 145er like everybody else in the current division that he's a champion in, he's going to be a very hard man to beat. He's the man in that division right now. And once again, I could be wrong, but that's why they call it the theater of the unknown, because you tune in to watch what happens in these fights and to see what happens in the results. Either way, enjoy them. And I will be back right here with the post-fight analysis, storylines, and everything in between. Enjoy the fights and enjoy International Fight Weekend.